Hi there, everybody. This is Scott down in the lounge, and I'm here with a quick note before I start a new novel. And I know I just put out, a couple of novels ago, another note saying that I wasn't going to be doing these notes anymore before novels. And generally I'm not, but occasionally there's going to be something that I'm going to read that needs a little explanation. And this is definitely one of those cases. The last few novels slash play that I've done have all been pretty short, somewhere in the 2.5 to 3.5 or 4 hour range. And so I've done several novels just in the last several weeks. But now that's changing. I'm going from really, really short books and a play, if you just listen to me do Shakespeare's Hamlet, to now the longest book ever written, the longest novel ever written. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a novel by the French author Marcel Proust, and it's called À la recherche du temps perdu. In English, In Search of Lost Time. This novel has the Guinness Book of World Records world record for the longest novel ever written. And not only is it a massive length novel, but it's also widely, very widely considered to be one of the very greatest novels ever written. Referencing the Greatest Books website that I use as my primary source for books that I want to read and which ones to read and not read, this is the number 2 book, the number 2 novel of all time. The only novel that ranks higher than this is James Joyce's Ulysses. And that book, Ulysses, to me comes with a massive asterisk, meaning I don't know if I will ever figure out a way to read that out loud in a podcast format. I've got it on my list. It's down at the bottom with a big asterisk, but it's not included with all the over 100 novels that I do have listed on my list that I want to get to. I don't know if I'll ever be able to read that one, just because if you know anything about it, it is incredibly difficult. And the format of it, I don't see how it can be done in an audiobook format. Who knows? Maybe someday I'll figure it out, but that day is way, way in the distant future. So that means if I don't end up reading Ulysses, then In Search of Lost Time will be the highest rated book that I will ever read in this podcast. And it's the longest book, which means I'm not going to be reading it all at one time, which will be a huge relief not only to you, but to me. The work was published in France between the years 1913 and 1927 and was initially published in English over the years 1922 to 1931. The primary English translator is a Scotsman named Scott Moncrieff, and he was assisted with the last volume of the novel by someone named Stephen Hudson, that name actually being a pseudonym of a British novelist and translator named Sidney Schiff. The reason why Sidney Schiff, or Stephen Hudson, had to finish the translation is that Scott Moncrieff died before he was able to finish the full translation of all 7 volumes of In Search of Lost Time. Not only did Moncrieff die before he could finish, Proust himself died before the final volume was completed. And it was thanks to his brother and extensive notes that Proust had left behind that the final volume was able to be finished. So, In Search of Lost Time, if you look at it in total, it has a word count of over 1.25 million words. It has a page count of anywhere from 3,000 to over 4,200 pages, depending on the printing and the publishing, who's reproducing it. Just for some context, other long novels that you might be more familiar with, for example, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, is approximately 1,300 to 1,400 pages, depending on its printing. So this book is approximately 2.5 to 3 times the length of War and Peace. Even larger than War and Peace is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which many of its printings have it at about 1,600 pages. As I said, fortunately for all of us, In Search of Lost Time is broken up into 7 volumes. And my plan is to spread those 7 volumes out over the course of my list of books. And so I'm starting with the first volume now, which is called Du Côte de Chez Swann, which is Swan's Way in English, or sometimes translated as The Way by Swan, which was originally published in 1913 in France. And then I'll be following up with the remainder of the volumes over the next probably 2 or 3 years. I'll be sprinkling a wide variety of other novels in between these. So I'm not going to expect anybody, you or me, to have to sit down and go through this book from start to finish without any kind of a break. Now, when all is said and done, and I've recorded all 7 volumes, and who knows how many hours that will be, I'm guessing somewhere in probably about the 120, 125 hour range is how long it will take to do all 7 volumes of this novel. Then, if you feel like it, start at the beginning, press play, and spend the next 6 or 7 days of your life listening to one of the greatest novels ever written. But I'm not going to record it that way, and most of you will never listen to it that way. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think I've talked long enough about this. Thanks for listening. Thanks those of you who are keeping up with me on a episode by episode basis. I do have a small, very dedicated core group of listeners who seem to download everything within only maybe 12 to 24 hours of me posting it. And you've kept up with just about everything that I've done so far, and so I'm guessing you're probably going to give this one a go too. I have read Swan's Way already. I have not read all 7 volumes, but I did read the first one. And I have to say, it is some of the most remarkable writing I've ever read. And I've read some of it out loud already to my wife a little bit. And it's remarkably easy to read. It's not that challenging. It's just extremely long. But it is also extremely, extremely good. So I hope that you take a chance on this. If you do, I think you won't regret it. It'll probably be one of the best things you've ever read, or in this case, listened to in your entire life. So let's get started with the first volume of In Search of Lost Time. This is Swan's Way.